Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 14th Annual Apapa Voters Forum. Please rise for the U.S. Marine Corps.
Can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave Peru to the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
If tomorrow all the things were gone, I'd work for all my life, and I had to start again with just my children and my wife. I thank my lucky stars to be living here today, 'cause the flag still stands for freedom, and they can't take that away. And I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free. And I won't forget the men who died, who gave that right to me. And I gladly stand up next to you and defend her still today, 'cause there ain't no doubt I love this land. God bless the USA. From the lakes of Minnesota to the hills of Tennessee, across the plains of Texas, from sea to shining sea, from Detroit down to Houston and New York to LA. Well, there's pride in every American heart, and it's time we stand and say that I'm proud to be an American.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our How to Get Involved and Make a Difference panel, moderated by Miss Jackie Wynn.
Hello. Good afternoon, everyone. How is everyone doing today? Come on, let's start one more time. Good afternoon, everyone. How is everyone doing today? Wonderful. That's the enthusiasm that I would like to hear. Good afternoon. My name is Jackie Wynn. I am the director of the Asian Pacific American Outreach for the California Senate Republican Caucus. And I also dabble in press as the press secretary for the Senate Republican Caucus as well. I would like to say it's an honor for me to be here this afternoon. To my right here, I would like to introduce you to CC Yin. We all know who Mr. CC Yin is, but just to make sure, he is the founder and chairman of Apapa. And then to my left here, we have Ms. Mariko Yamada. Please give her a warm round of applause. As well as Ms. Wilma Chan. Both of these wonderful ladies once served in our California State Assembly. So let's start with our first panel here. We're going to break it up in 2 sessions, 15 minutes, and so each of our panelists will have about a minute to respond. I would like to kick it off here. This first panel is how to get involved and make a difference. And before we proceed, I just want to say that it's amazing to see the young faces out there in the crowd. So many young faces, students as well as parents, Asian Americans in our community. I'm very proud to see that and to know that, you know, in the year 2055, Asian Americans are supposed to be surpassing Latinos here in the United States by 36%. That means our API community has a huge stake and has opportunities to be in politics as well as helping to vote those into politics. So let's first kick off our panel here. The first question I'm going to ask is for Cece. It's going to be a 2-part question here. First of all, why is it important to get out there and vote, Mr. Yin?
Well, this $1 million question, and in democratic system, especially Americans, the founding principle that the government, the country belong to individuals, every person of this country as citizens. How that works, that means this only opportunity we have or rights everybody has is one vote. And that also translates into a duty for us, not just say, I want to vote, but I have responsibility to make sure that the government, the people, and the policies that we elect and set are reflection of my personal and my family and the values and the principles.
Absolutely, that was great. And then the second part is, what else can citizens do in addition to voting to making a difference here?
Well, citizens, since you own the government, people like Wilma and Mariko, many elected officials actually work for you. You pay them. You pay them two things. One, you pay them the honor, the trust you give to them. That's great honor that you trust them to make decisions for you. That's for your lives sometimes, for your success or failures. And that's big trust. That's big, great value to them. Secondly, you pay their salaries. Everything to do, the family, you pay them. You direct. Therefore, you make sure you elect the right person that reflect, understand you. And secondly, make sure they do a good job for you.
I think you brought up a very good point there, Mr. Yin, that, a lot of these elected officials, that when they are in office, the trust and the integrity of the office there. You brought up a very good point, and, the people there are voting for these individuals in office. Let's kick it off here with Ms. Yamada over here in regards to that. When you were in office, back in 2008 to 2014 in California State Assembly, how did you serve that office with integrity here?
Well, thank you. First, I want to thank the 14th Annual Apapa Voters Forum for inviting us, and really want to congratulate you on continuing this event every year. It's grown and has evolved and has been just one of the keystones of Asian Pacific American political and public affairs participation. So I just wanted to say that at the beginning. I came into office in one of the most difficult times facing our state and our country. And I think more than ever, people are hungry for honesty and integrity in public service. There are many breaches to that public trust, and I think it's really incumbent on those of us that both present ourselves for public office as well as serve in public office to try to daily maintain a certain code of ethics. I know that that's very difficult to imagine that there could be a code of ethics or a certain way for people to comport themselves in public office. But I do think that presenting yourself for an office means that you are willing to stand up to the kind of scrutiny, the bright lights, and to pretty much put yourself forward transparently and do what you say you're going to do. I think that there's a lot of distrust and disappointment in public officials, and I think that's something that I've always tried to do, to maintain a sense of belief that we are really there to serve you.
Absolutely, that was great. And before we kick off here to Ms. Wilma Chan, if I can just follow up with you here, Mariko, how did you calculate your chances in terms of running, and why did you decide to run?
Well, that question, the word calculate, I think it's different for different people. My first race was actually more of a sprint race. I was not planning to run for office. Came about following the most chaotic time in California government after the recall of our governor, Gray Davis. I was called upon by the governor to fill in a vacant position on the Board of Supervisors. So my first foray into elected office was really as a result of an appointment. The more compelling story is when I chose to run for the California State Assembly in 2008. I wasn't planning to do that. There was an opponent who was pretty much presenting himself as the heir apparent to the seat. He had $500,000 in the bank. I had $10,000 in the bank. But I didn't want him to be the only choice. And so if you were to say calculation, it was not the formulaic, target book analysis. Do you have enough money? Do you have enough endorsements? Do you have the right consultants, the right handlers? to win. I chose to run and then kind of got the infrastructure later. And we were not expected to win, but we did win, and I'm very proud to have had the support of many in this room in that endeavor. So I think, again, going back to my earlier answer about people being hungry for authenticity, I think people want to support those who they can honestly feel they have a connection with. And you don't get that by mail, TV ads, phone calls. You get that by direct person-to-person contact.
So perhaps the better word is, instead of calculating, it was more perseverance then that you won in that race.
Well, win or lose, I think it's always important, you make your decision to run. Sometimes you change during the course of that decision-making process, but I think my family and my closest friends and my strongest supporters know that once I make up my mind, there's really nothing that changes that course. I mean, it would have to be something very, very compelling for me to reverse course. Once I make a commitment to present myself either for an office or on a project or an issue, I'm kind of known just since playground days to not back down.
Wonderful. Well, then the next couple questions. Let's go with the next couple of questions to Ms. Wilma Chan here, currently serving in the Board of Supervisors for Alameda County. So the first question is, in your experiences running for office, what roles did volunteers play in helping you get elected?
Well, we have a lot of great volunteers out here. I don't think anyone can really win a race without grassroots support. As CC said, it's voters. A lot of times in politics, you look at money and you look at endorsements, but at the end of the day, people have to come out and vote for you. The people will come out and vote for you if you have volunteers who know the people, who you've met in social clubs, who you've met in politics, who you've met at church, wherever you've met them. I've had volunteers. I've run for office 9 times, and I won 8 of them. It's very interesting to lose one, but anyway, I've won 8 of them since 1990. And we've had volunteers who hand-addressed 2,000 pieces of mail, put the stamps on them. And people notice that. Would you open a letter that was just hand-typed and just had a, that regular postmark on it, or would you rather open a letter that was hand-addressed to you, that had a real stamp on it, that that someone supported that candidate, and that's how you got that piece of mail. So I think volunteers are really key to winning any election, just like they're really key to the success of this event today.
And I think also volunteers, when I was volunteering on a few campaigns there prior to jumping into politics and working on a congressional race down in San Diego, I think it also inspires the volunteers because you get to kind of rub elbows with the candidate, as well as, you can go home and you can share your experiences with your family. How would you feel in regards to, when, you're interacting with volunteers in the office there?
Well, campaigns aren't always fun. There's some good days and there are some bad days. And the thing a lot of times that keeps the candidate going, and I'm sure Marika will agree, is the volunteers. Because they're there because they believe in you. They're not getting paid, They come in every night. They'll make phone calls for you. They'll put up signs for you. They'll walk for you. So when you have those bad days as a candidate, which you are bound to have those bad days, who's going to pick you up? It's your family and your volunteers. So they're very, very key, and I can't overemphasize how grateful candidates are for people who will give of their own time, their own money, their own resources because they believe in what you're doing, and that's very inspiring to candidates and very necessary.
Absolutely. And if I may kick this question over to Cece here to my right in regards to volunteers, Apapa is your baby for the past 14 years. Next year, you're going to be celebrating the 15th year that Apapa has been started under your leadership here. How do you feel in regards to seeing the sea of faces in the audience here, and so many of them are young people that you're sitting up here wondering, I want these young people to be volunteers and to help out. Doesn't matter what their political affiliation is. I want them to get involved. How does that make you feel?
Well, first, I'm not very old either. So I feel young with younger. Today, look at here. This is America. You see the faces, you see the smile, you look at the way you look it up. This is the day that you said, I'm American, and this country, this government is mine. You decide who should be serving you. So that's what I feel about the volunteers now. Super Education, Apapa, and many other organizations. We have 30 organizations more APIs together, plus NAACP, everybody else here is not just young people, but young people is our future. You're right. It's the best vote in the future. But everybody is equally important. So if we get voters, I mean individuals, not just voters, feel they are important to their family, to themselves, to cast that vote, or get more vote out as volunteers, like Wilma said, get out the doors to get 10, 20, 100 votes. That's how Apapa is an education foundation, nonpartisan, non-political, ask every citizen or even non-citizens to actively engage to be a part of political process in America. And we would build a better union, better country, more equal, more justice for all.
Wonderful. And you're right there, Mr. Yin. The folks out here in the audience are the faces of America here. So let me ask you this question, then we'll go over to these wonderful ladies here. What strategies or ideas can be implemented to get more ethnic minorities to vote? What are your thoughts in regards to that?
Say it again.
Oh, sure. What strategies or ideas can be implemented to get more minorities, ethnic minorities, to vote?
Well, I think two-part my thought is, number one, that we individuals has to take total responsibility. We can't blame the government or elected officials or corporations or the past history that we do not want to actively engage in the process because they didn't treat us, they don't treat us right. No, that's own work. Because if you don't participate, go out to vote, get your friends to vote, get people run for offices that represent your ideals, your needs, your backgrounds, you will never get that right. So I'm saying so responsibility is falling on each one as me and you. The second part is we need to get organized so you can influence not 100, 1,000, a million people. So they can go out to share your views, your ideas, to build a better country.
Absolutely. Thank you so much there, Mr. C.C. Yin. And what about you, Ms. Yamada, in terms of strategies and ideas that can be implemented to get more ethnic minorities to get out there and vote?
Well, you know, I have a saying that's not original, but I'll share it with you. I don't quite remember the first time I heard it. But the saying is, if you're not at the table, you'll be on the menu, okay? If you're not, so remember, if you're not at the table, you'll be on the menu. And that's not just because my husband grew up in a Chinese restaurant, because he is Chinese, by the way.
The food.
What I wanted to say is that I consider voting, the privilege of voting, it's really a sacred honor. There are so many people that fought and died for this right to vote in this country. And around the world, the franchise is still not equal. But I'm just talking about in our own nation, how many people fought for and died for this right. There are also people who serve in the military today, or who have served in the military, that continue to fight and defend our nation's right to vote. So voting is, sort of to me a real sacred covenant with the foundational principles of our democracy. So how can we translate that into encouraging people to vote? We just got signed into law automatic voter registration, again, though tied to your driver's license or a state ID. So it's still not, available to everyone, but it's a step in the right direction. Now we have to figure out ways to make people feel included, that, how many times have you felt maybe that your vote didn't count? But your vote does count. Every single vote counts. And so I think that it is incumbent not only on political parties, but also community organizations such as Apapa, who have done such a tremendous amount of work already, to reach out and make people feel included. You know, no matter what, people want to be asked. Some of us who are political junkies, you know, would never miss a vote. I mean, that's in fact how the pollsters and pundits figure out where to target mail. They send mail to what are called 5 out of 5 voters or 6 out of 6 voters. Have never missed a vote. But it's the people who don't vote regularly that we should analyze and ensure that we're reaching out and making civic engagement relevant to their daily lives. And I don't think that is just in one ethnic group or another. That's all kinds of voters. So, you know, as a person that is seeking public office again next year, I would not take a single vote for granted. So that would be my answer.
Fantastic. Wonderful answer there. Thank you so much. And then we're going to go with our final question for our panelists. Let's start with Ms. Chan here. What advice would you give to someone out there who's thinking about running for office?
Okay, I also have a saying, which is, it's not who you are, it's what you do. We see a lot of people running for office today because they think it's going to make them famous, it's going to put them in the newspaper, it's going to be glamorous. And you know, when you're in elected office, you hear a lot of praise, and some of it is actually false. You know, people are going to come and shake your hand and all this. The best advice I think I can give to anybody who wants to run for office is you have to do it for another reason than wanting those things. Most people who are successful in office are people who have a passion for something. It could be, you know, for business, you know, making sure that business does well in California. It could be for elderly, making sure that elderly in California are protected. It can be for our young people, making sure that there are good schools for every single child in California. It could be for health care. But there needs to be a reason, a compelling reason for you to run for office beyond that looks attractive, I want to be there. So that's the first thing. And it's really important because it's not that easy to run for office. And what's going to drive you through this, besides the volunteers and the support you get, is your mission, the reason why you're doing it. Otherwise, you're really not going to make it. Or if you make it, you're not going to be very good at your job. And I think one thing about Asian Americans, we like to excel at what we do. And excelling means we have to do a good job while we're in office. We have to represent our communities well. We have to represent our constituents well. So if I just leave you with one thing, you know, just remember again, it's not who you are, it's what you do.
Great advice there. Thank you. And you, Ms. Yamada?
Well, you know, I certainly don't want this panel to just, you know, be remembered with certain glib phrases, but I do have another phrase for, you know, an answer to this question. I think when you choose to run for public office, you have to have the heart of a lion and the height of a rhinoceros. Because it, just as Wilma just said, you know, it is not an easy path to take. But I'm looking around the room here, and, you know, I would say that there are people here in this audience that probably should consider running for office. If you haven't considered it before, you know, sometimes you look around and say, hey, it's not me. But, you know, it might be you, because just as Wilma said, you have to have a passion for an issue, area of expertise, a problem that you wish to share your knowledge about in order to solve. You look around and say, hey, you know, I could do that. And I think that definitely looking back at my 41 years in public service, starting in Los Angeles County in 1974, there were only a handful of APIs that were even working in the public sector, in the political sector. We used to have a small group called the Asian Lunch Bunch. That's how many of us there were. We would get together once a month for dim sum to commiserate and to support one another because there weren't very many of us around. Now you look at the California State Capitol, just as one example, there are over 100 plus API Capitol staffers. We have been in this country for, you know, hundreds of years. We have a right to be here. We have compelling information to share and talents to bring to bear to solve some of California's and United States' biggest problems. We shouldn't be the first of. We should only be, the beginning of. And I just say, if you have a passion for solving problems for the common good, you could be a candidate as well. And I would encourage you to seek that out.
Great. Thank you so much. That was wonderful here. Aren't these panelists wonderful? Ladies and gentlemen, let's give them a warm round of applause here as we conclude the first part of panel 1. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Susie. Sure. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Ms. Chan. Okay, I think we're going to continue on with the second part of our panel here. Let's welcome. Gentlemen, welcome to the stage. Hello. Hello. Nice to well. Whatever you would decide. Thank you. You gentlemen sit over there. Isn't this a great photo opportunity with me and this gentleman over here? Our height difference. Let's all have a seat here, gentlemen. So this is the second part of the first panel in regards to how to get involved and make a difference. So to my right here is Mr. Steve Lee, Elk Grove City Council member. Please give him a warm round of applause. To my left here is Mr. Alan Warren, City Council member for the City of Sacramento. Please give him a warm round of applause. And finally over here is Mr. Bassam Elkara, who's with CAR, and he also ran for the school board. Is that correct? Please give these three gentlemen a warm round of applause. Okay, so gentlemen, we're going to have 1 minute here. Let's start off with Mr. Lee here to my right. Why did you decide to run for office?
Very good question. If I can go back about 15 years, I was approached by a young man. Many of you know him as C.C. Yin. And he unveiled a concept that moved me. He talked about creating an organization that will be able to foster young people, young Asian Pacific Islanders, to look at the opportunities of public service. I joined that organization, and I was honored by being one of the founding board members. But not only that, after I left the board to go to law school, I thought about it, and I realized that everything that I learned in the organization is really the foundation to public service. And so I certainly am proud to say that I am a product of Apapa, in that I took it further and embraced it fully and ran for public office. But more, on another note, I started out as a young activist, and after years of asking the electeds, can you do this for our community, can you do that for our community, I just got frustrated because nothing was getting done. And so when I realized that instead of being reactive to the policies that are in place, why don't I be proactive and actually be in a position of power to make the decision?
Fantastic. So you got involved then because you felt like you had the need to get involved.
Absolutely.
Okay, great. And for you here, Mr. Warren, what did you decide to run? Why did you decide to run for office?
Well, great. Thank you very much. For me to decide to run for city council was a very difficult decision because my wife and I, at the time, we had 3 young kids, and we were doing a lot of things trying to make preparations for our lives together, and we were actually not even living in Sacramento. We were living in one of the suburbs. But a number of leaders from District 2 had come to me and asked me to consider running for city council, and the stories that they would tell me were very compelling. I grew up in a part of Sacramento called Del Paso Heights, And Del Paso Heights, please, please. So the district that I represent now is, I believe, the most diverse district in the entire city of Sacramento. And most of you probably know that Sacramento is considered one of the most diverse cities in the entire country. But in that particular community of Del Paso Heights, no longer did there exist a full-service grocery store. There was no longer a bank in Del Paso Heights. There were no gas stations in Del Paso Heights. And so my wife, who is also from Del Paso Heights, we had a discussion, and we decided that we needed, not only did we need, it was really our obligation to come back home to try to do what we can. And I'm very proud to announce that the first new grocery store in Del Paso Heights will be opening later this month. The second one we will be announcing. There's another full-service grocery store that we'll be announcing next month. And then there's other good things to come. But it was really the fact that we wanted to continue to give back, and we thought that being elected into the city council was our best opportunity to really bring about some of these positive changes. So
Wonderful. So I'm hearing two things here. Thank you so much there, Mr. Warren. Two things here that I'm hearing. One is Mr. Lee here to my right said that, you know what? I'm not going to be satisfied with the answer that I'm given, and I want to jump in and help. So that's the first theme. And the second theme that I'm hearing here from you, Mr. Warren, is that you wanted to give back to your community. And therefore, that's why you ran, and you're serving. And congratulations there on the businesses that are coming to Del Paso Heights. We look forward to seeing the grand opening celebration there. So let's go on to you here, sir, in regards to this question. You recently ran for, I believe, school board. And why did you decide to run?
So for me, it was one of the most difficult decisions to make because my wife was pregnant with twins, and she was due right around election time. And so, you know, I actually was hoping someone else would run that I could support. And I told them, I said, you know what, let's try to find a candidate from our community that I can support. I waited until Friday of the deadline to put my name on the ballot because I was hoping that someone else would throw their name on the ballot. They didn't, but for me it was personal. And the reason I joined the race was that I have 4 kids that are going to be in the school district. And this school district has, you know, it's the worst performing school district in the region. And so I said, if I'm going to stay in Natomas where I live, and I love my neighbors, I love the diversity, I didn't want to move to the suburbs. I wanted to stay, you know, in the city. I said, we're going to have to make a difference in the school board. And so that's when I decided, you know what, I gotta do this. It's gonna be a life changer, you know, especially with 4 young children. But I said the sacrifice is worth it because not only for my children, and anyone knows the work that I do, is I work on justice issues, civil rights issues, and education is the great equalizer. And so I said every student deserves a great education. I grew up in San Francisco, and I went to one of the roughest high schools, and it was actually an API organization that helped me and other minorities get into UC Berkeley. So you see that when there's partnerships, when community works with schools, what can be achieved. So I felt that with my experience, that you know I can help make a difference in Twin Rivers.
Absolutely. So then, here we have the theme here. You wanted to set a future up for your 4 young children. Mr. Warren here wanted to give back to his community. And Mr. Lee here said he wasn't satisfied with getting the answers, so he wanted to get involved. Great answers, gentlemen. Thank you so much. So let's move on to the next question here. Let's start with you, sir. What mistakes did you make during your campaign, and what lessons did you learn from them?
So in a campaign, you can never walk enough. You have to walk, knock on doors. You can have as many volunteers as you want, but at the end of the day, you're the person the candidate is the person that's going to get the votes. And also, so I won on election day 75% of the vote, but I still lost the election. So, you know, at the end of the day, the election a lot of times now is going to be won with absentee votes. And so a lot of people already made up their minds early on, and so you have to target folks early on. You got to make sure you get your mail out early on. So even though I won most of the votes that came in later, I wasn't able to get the early votes. And some of those folks, I actually, you know, met them in the community, said, oh, we already voted. And then I said, well, you know, I might run in the future. Can I talk to you? And they said, had you come earlier, we would have voted for you. So you got to make sure, you got to reach people early, you got to reach them fast, and make sure you get your mail out there early so you can at least slow it down so they can say, okay, well, you know what, I need to give this a little more thought before them just casting their ballot in. So make sure you start early.
Good point there in regards to you are the face. I mean, if you are the candidate, you are the face out there. So the voters want to meet you. So just out of curiosity, how many pairs of shoes did you go through walking?
You know, I bought I bought my first pair of running shoes in like think in a decade, and man, no matter what you're wearing, if you're even wearing slacks, you still gotta wear your running shoes because you're gonna walk miles a day. And I used to go until I used to push it a little bit. Sun sets, it's getting a little dark. People are like, you should probably go home now. But if I saw a neighbor out, their lights are on, or they're in front of their house, I'd take every chance to talk to someone. And so you're gonna have to walk quite a bit. And like I said, you got to talk to your family, because one of the challenges is that make sure that your family's on board, because with two young children, the twins weren't born yet, I had to walk and for hours at a time, and so wasn't there to help the family. So you got to make sure you got to find the way to balance that out.
Fantastic. And how about you, Mr. Warren? What mistakes, if there were any, in your campaign, and what lessons did you learn from them?
Sure. Well, I think in politics, you really can take nothing for granted. And that was one of the things that I learned early on, is that, once you put your name into the hat to be elected as an elected official, people start to look at you a little differently. People start to ask you questions that you may have never had to answer before with them. People who you think will support you may not support you, but then there are others who you may not have known or would have thought they would have supported you that show up and support you. And so, I think, as I look back, I can really unequivocally state that politics, if it were a sport, it would be the most physical sport that any of us could ever play. More physical than football, more physical than MMA fighting. It is a very difficult journey. And for those of you that are interested in politics, you really have to understand why you're doing it, because people will try to push you to either side. And whatever decision you make, there's always going to be people on the other side. And that was one of the things I had not considered when I was running for public office. I thought you could make a good decision based on all the information, and then everybody would agree. But that's not always the case.
Thank you. You brought up some really great points there. You mentioned the physical, but then there's also that emotional aspect of being part of the campaign as well. We all know that with campaigns, financial is a big prong of it, but the emotional aspect of it as well. And I think you brought up some really good points there, Mr. Warren.
Yeah, emotionally, it's a huge investment. And so, this is not for the meek at heart. There are going to be, as I heard others say on the previous panel, there are going to be good days and bad days. But this is about staying the course and being true to yourself. And ultimately, win or lose, then you can sleep and live with yourself. It's very important that your constitution remains stable. And so I was always very secure in that. But I did not know that, as Bassem said, you really got to get out and touch people. Because most of us have never had to go and walk on doors and meet strangers and then try to, in 10 seconds, tell somebody who you are and why you're running. And that is a very different experience for most of us.
Wonderful. I just have one quick question here, and then we're going to wrap it up with this panel. Mr. Lee, one final question here is, what advice that you can provide to our audience out there in regards to running for office?
The one thing that I certainly want you young people to internalize is, if you believe in something, do it. The moment that you declare your candidacy, as Vice Mayor Alan Warren has said, those that you think will support you may not. And those that you least expect it will turn out and support you. And when you start identifying with the core values and truly believing in making a difference in the community, that's when you're going to stand out. And for each and every one of you who are on the fence, who are considering it, consider me a resource. I am readily available to consult with you at no cost, because I truly believe that the only way we can actually achieve something significant is that each and every one of our communities work together.
Thank you so much there. Please, let's give a warm round of applause for our three panelists.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our Breaking New Barriers panel, moderated by Ms. Pamela Wu.
Good afternoon. Thanks once again for joining us. I'm Pamela Wu, Director of Marketing and Communications for UC Davis School of Law and contributing host of Insight on Capital Public Radio here in Sacramento. My thanks to Apapa and to CCN for organizing yet another invaluable forum and for the opportunity to participate in the discussion. Your involvement in forums like this give your community a voice in public service. It can break barriers. And that brings us to the title of our next panel discussion, Breaking New Barriers Running for Office. I am very pleased to welcome today's panelists. Please welcome Assemblyman David Chu, Democrat representing San Francisco. Assemblyman Devin Mathis, Republican representing Inyo and parts of Tulare and Kern counties. Assemblyman Evan Lowe, Democrat representing parts of the South Bay, most notably Silicon Valley. And Assemblymember Ling Ling Chang, Republican whose district encompasses parts of Los Angeles, Orange, and San Bernardino counties. I'd like to thank all of you for participating in this very important discussion today. As I mentioned, this talk is about breaking new barriers. And so I'd like to start by asking, who or what inspired you to run for office? Assemblyman Chu, I'll start with you.
Thank you so much, Pamela. First of all, good afternoon, Apapa. How are we doing today? I have to say that, and I think this is probably the case for all of my elected colleagues here on stage, it wasn't just a few years ago that there wouldn't be a room of this size of Asian Americans coming together to talk about political mobilization. And in fact, 15 years ago when I started as an activist in my city of San Francisco, we were at a time when there were hardly any Asian Americans who were elected to office. There were very few who were actually running for office, and we didn't have a lot of role models or mentors. And I want to just say that I think for many of us, what Apapa is doing here, what CC and the Apapa board are doing, are really moving us forward in dramatic ways. But for me, many of my role models early on were civil rights activists. I'm a former civil rights attorney, and as someone who in college studied Martin Luther King and what the African American community did to move our entire civil rights agenda forward, moving to San Francisco and California, and learning about the story and the fight of the International Hotel, the fight of Filipino-American civil rights and labor leaders in the farm workers movement. That is what really inspired me early on.
Assemblyman Mathis. The same question to you. Who or what inspired you to run for office?
Well, for me in particular, I served 2 tours in Iraq. And when I got home, it was 2008, and we were in the middle of the crash. And I just kind of looked around and I went, you know, we're hearing all this, our children and our grandchildren are going to bear the burden. And I'm going, wait a minute, I am one of those children, and my kids are the grandkids. We've got to stand up and we've got to do something, and we've got to take our state and our country back and go do something and get involved, because if we don't, I mean, it's our future's at stake. And, you know, just everybody being out here showing that involvement, that's what it's all about.
Thank you very much. Assemblyman Lowe, I'll ask you too, who or what inspired you to run for office? And also, what barriers do you think you overcame or ran into when you ran for office?
Well, I think when I ran for office, I was 20 years old. And at the time, there were not number and the prevalence of strong leaders representing the Asia Pacific Islander community, and it was incumbent upon us and the generations, particularly the younger generations, to take on that helm and follow in the footsteps of those that have come before us. And what I think is so reflective and representative of this panel here today is the younger representation of public servants. Typically, in the Asian community, just as my father's an optometrist, my uncle's an orthodontist, they said you should become a doctor, a lawyer, or an engineer. And so I'm a bad Chinese son because I was not any of those things. But you see the importance of civic engagement and duty. And I think what's so important is you see a cross-section of generations of ethnic communities now standing up to that call of duty.
Assemblywoman Chang, I'll pose the same two questions to you, in fact. Who or what inspired you to run for office, and what barriers do you think you feel you overcame in doing so?
So a lot of people have probably heard this story quite a few times. I actually fell into politics completely by accident. I used to think that politicians are slimy and sleazy, which some are. But I was fortunate enough to meet some really good people who were encouraging me to run for office. And my first elected seat was to the Water Board, and I unseated a 21-year incumbent and became the first woman to serve on that water board in its 50 years of existence at that time. But I mean, I overcame a lot because I was a young Asian American woman in my 20s. When I was campaigning, people looked at me and thought, oh, this is so cute. You know, she thinks she can unseat a 21-year incumbent. She has no idea what she's doing, what she thinks she can do. And also with my name, Ling Ling Chang. When people look at my name, they assume that I can't speak English. They weren't sure if I'm a man or a woman. I actually did knock on a door, and this family said, oh, you settled a family bet, because we weren't sure if Ling Ling's a man or a woman.
Wow.
So it was imperative that I campaigned door to door. But you know, ultimately, at the end of the day, I think if you do your homework and you work hard and you devote the time and you are in it for the right reasons, you will succeed being a public servant. And I will say, with my interactions with Apapa, my first panel was serving on the Apapa panel as a water board member back in 2005, so it was many years ago. And thank you, CC, for supporting the cause and encouraging the API community to come out and be active in politics and the community.
I think that's really fascinating to me and to a lot of the people here in the audience, that you encountered social barriers, if you will, that were both overt and kind of implicit at the same time. Let me ask, what you think is the most important lesson? This question I'll pose to all four of you. What do you think is the most important lesson that you've learned through your experiences running for office? Assemblyman Chu?
I think the first most important thing is just the importance of service, of having the opportunity to work and build community. In San Francisco, I live about a dozen blocks from San Francisco's Chinatown, which is not just the oldest Chinatown in the country, but it is a community that has tremendous need. We have some of the poorest residents of San Francisco. We have thousands of first-generation Chinese immigrants who are living 3, 4, 5 to a room that might be 10 by 15 feet. And the average income is less than $15,000 a year. And for many of us, and I think this is probably all of us in this room, who've had the opportunity, the opportunities that we have here in this country, it's so important for us to give back. And what was important for me was to have the opportunity to work with activists, to work with community leaders, to move forward our Asian American community. And when I first decided to run, now some 7 years ago, for the San Francisco Board of Supervisors, Chinatown had never been represented by someone who looked like us in the 160-year history of San Francisco's Chinatown and of our city itself. And to have the opportunity to work and build bridges with so many of you here in this room, and also, another thing I'll just mention, the importance of building coalitions across diverse communities with our African American, our Latino, our white, our LGBT, our intergenerational leaders is just something that I know Apapa takes very seriously, and something that I know all of us here on the stage takes very seriously as well.
Assemblyman Mathis, what important lesson did you take away from running for office?
Just the ability to bring people together. In my race, I had because California has a top 2 election. which is great for all the voters because you guys really get to pick, hey, who's the best person? And for me, I wasn't the top guy out. I was the second guy, and just barely by a narrow margin. And I had to go around and really work with different people and bring them together as one to get my numbers up, to get my name out there. And, you know, one of the biggest things I always think about, and before, you know, running, I was very big with veterans advocacy. And, you know, you always hear, you know, that's this person's baby. This is their idea. And people hold that idea very close and they don't want to let it go. But then there's also the saying that it takes a village to raise a child. And when we come together and we bring different communities together, we can raise that idea and we can come together and do great things. And, you know, we're doing that here today with Apapa's help and with this group and all the sponsors that are out here. And just that challenge, though, because it is such a challenge because everybody has their own unique idea and their own unique perspective. But when you do come together like we are here today, great things happen.
Assemblyman Lowe, important lessons that you've taken away from running for office?
Sure. Well, let me ask the audiences a question. In terms of occupations, positive or negative connotations? Doctor, positive or negative? Positive.
Positive.
If you said firefighter, positive or negative?
Positive.
If I said teacher, positive or negative? If I said politician, positive or negative?
Positive. Positive.
So you think all of us are bad people, huh? The reason why I asked this question, I want to be abundantly clear, is in terms of the question, which was, what is the lesson that we've learned? And particularly for me, the important lesson is to be authentic in the face of relentless scrutiny. You know, too often times you'll see that politicians will try to pander or they'll make promises that they can't keep. But it's so important to maintain to our core and what we fundamentally believe, and I'm hopeful that when we maintain a level of authenticity, that we will make sure that people will understand why we believe in an issue and to maintain to our core and our values.
How hard is that? That's obviously a message that really resonates with the audience and with voters too. For someone who is an office holder, how hard is that to maintain in the face of things like poll numbers and focus groups and consultants?
Go ahead, Ling. It is part of the democratic process. When my Chinese grandmother reads the World Journal Tsingtao paper, she says, "Oh my gosh, they're saying bad things about you." And of course, what's important to be able to understand is that this is the democratic process, and it's expected, and it's important for all of us to collectively to hold us accountable. Hold our elected officials accountable to making sure that we are serving in the public interest. And when you have the lowest voter turnout in the November 2014 elections, individuals in California are abrogating their responsibilities to hold us accountable. So what's important is that we understand this is the role that we have ahead of us, but to understand that we are looking for solutions. And so it's fair game to understand that we are going to be criticized or held accountable, but how do we then understand that this is a position that individuals hold, but then collectively, Republican, you see it clearly here right today, up on this panel, 2 Republicans, 2 Democrats, finding out solutions to talk about the importance of civic engagement.
I think we have fans of bipartisanship and authenticity in the audience as well. Thank you very much for that well thought out answer. Assemblywoman Chang, lessons that you've learned through your experiences running for office?
So I was just saying to Assemblymember Lowe, man, he just took my answer. I was thinking authenticity the whole entire time, particularly, you know, coming from a place where I thought that politicians are slimy and sleazy. You know, I thought that authenticity is key. And frankly, I am an immigrant. I came to the States when I was 3, and I can speak Chinese and Mandarin and Taiwanese. And I'm a Republican, so it's a pleasure to be able to represent the Chinese-Taiwanese community in elected office. But also, coupling that with being authentic and making sure that you don't make any empty promises, what's realistic and what's not. A lot of politicians tend to pander to, what the polls say, but what I've seen this year, and to be completely honest, and I've been saying this meeting after meeting, getting to know the freshman class, which we are all part of, everyone is intelligent, thoughtful, pragmatic, authentic, and that was incredibly refreshing, and that's reflective in the legislation that we passed this year. And I have to say that I am very optimistic that California is going to be moving in a positive direction, and we're moving California forward with great folks like these three up here. And you see a lot of bipartisan collaboration, which, this should be a model for the rest of the nation, frankly.
I think a lot of us like what we're seeing right here on the couches, in fact. For our next question, just so that you're not always, Assemblyman Chu, the first one to answer each question, we'll make sure that everyone has an opportunity to answer, but I'm going to pose this question to you first, Assemblyman Mathis. Which of your background experiences do you feel was most important or helpful in running a campaign and getting elected?
See, that one's very easy for me. I was an Army sergeant for 10 years, and with the war in Iraq, we trained on counterinsurgency tactics. And I talked to, where's Jacob at? A young man here who was a Marine. And, he was asking me the same question. And I asked him, I go, what are counterinsurgency tactics? What are we doing overseas? And it's winning hearts and minds, going door to door and talking to people and letting them know, hey, we're here to help you. How many people out here have heard that saying, hi, we're here from the government and we're here to help?
Yeah.
Everybody sees that as a bad thing. It's a scary thing. But our job is to actually be here to help. And, I joke about it back home, and when I do town halls, I'm like, my job, our thing in the office is to be there to help. It's a customer service, and we provide the service of government. And that's how it truly needs to be. But for me, the best thing was, the time in the military, because I knew what it was to get up early, to work hard, to work against opposition, and just go out there and get it done. My district's very large. It's, Tulare County. I cover all of Inyo County and even part of Kern County. And to drive from Visalia around to Bishop is about a 5 to 6 hour drive depending on traffic. And I walked precincts everywhere. And there was a lot of people that went, what are you doing in Inyo County walking precincts? They're only 1.8% of your overall vote. And I go, well, they're constituents too. They're people. They deserve to be represented. And so I went and I talked to them, and I still make an effort to go out to my other areas and talk to people.
Were they surprised to see you?
Oh, they love it. They absolutely love it. And they come out, and we have little town halls and do things with the chambers there and meet with them. I actually have artwork from Inyo County. And for those of you who don't know, I cover the highest and lowest part because I have Mount Whitney and Death Valley in my district. So it's a lot of fun. But no, it just, that whole time in the military, going into the office, running, looking at the leadership stuff, learning how to bring people together, it was super important. I've got the 30-second sign, so I'll cut it now. Just one thing, for military, you have a group of people that are thrown together from all over everywhere with multiple backgrounds, and you've got to get together and work and make it work, and that's what we do.
Assemblymember Lowe, which of your background experiences was most critical or helpful in getting you where you are today?
One aspect is that I lost my first election back in 2004. I ran for office when I was 21 years old. And particularly for the Asian and Chinese community, we like to have a good public face. Mm-hmm. Everyone, we're successful. You don't talk about failures. And one thing that I really attribute to the experience to where I am today is to learn from failure. And the region I represent is Silicon Valley, so you have a lot of startups. And part of the innovation and economy and the mentality is to put it yourself out and identify risk. risk is important, risk and reward. And so how do you then look back and say, there are opportunities and we need to take risks, take a look at opportunities, and try to find out what you can learn from that, because certainly it builds character. And so I'd encourage particularly any young person and or individuals who are young at heart to further look at the opportunity of risk, because I think it's important that we put ourselves out there. And oftentimes culturally we like to stay within the box and we don't like to draw outside of the lines, but it's important to be able to take a look at that, and I think that's the future of where we're headed.
Great advice. Assemblywoman Chang, which of your background experiences was most valuable?
So I have a pretty diverse background. I was in the corporate sector as a project manager for a health information systems company, so in the tech industry. And then most recently I ran a science education center for kids for the past 9 years. But I was also elected to, like I said, a local water agency in 2005, then to the Diamond Bar City Council in 2009, served as mayor of Diamond Bar in 2011, and then now I'm in the assembly. So it's, I would have to say that a person's experiences will always be beneficial to what you bring to the table up here in Sacramento, because diversity is really key. I think it encourages a lot of collaboration in understanding each other's positions and kind of their experiences and making sure that every voice is heard. And I think that we do see that here in Sacramento. But I will stress that those with local government experience, because we all tend to, when you're in local government, you don't really think about partisanship. You just think about the issues that you need to focus on. And a lot of folks in this class came from local government, so you'll see a lot of focus on just the issues, and I appreciate that, frankly. You know, I've always been a policy wonk, and you see a lot of focus on policy rather than partisan politics, and that's really encouraging for me.
Assemblyman Hsu, valuable background experiences?
So first of all, I would agree with Ling. Many of us who are on the stage, we were all local government officials before we got to the State Assembly. And as the former president of the San Francisco Board of Supervisors, that was an incredible training ground for me to do what we all do together at the state level. But I would say for me, there were two parts of my background that were, or have been really formative of how I do the work that I do. First, I am an attorney by background. I worked as a civil rights attorney and as a criminal prosecutor. And that background not only taught me how to advocate, because we always have to advocate with each other and with the public on what it is that we want, but those are experiences that taught me who it is that I fight for. Years ago, I had clients who were Asian immigrants who were being kicked out of housing in my city, in our state. I worked with crime victims, Filipino women who had been abused by their husbands. I worked with activists here in this room advocating for health care, advocating for civil rights, and that's an important part of my background. But I would also say, like many of you here in this room, I did spend a number of years, 9 years, running a small business, and that experience, for those of you who come from business backgrounds, is important not just to managing winning campaigns, but to understanding how government ought to run, learning how to balance difficult budgets, making those difficult choices that you do when you're trying to keep your business afloat and thriving, when you're trying to figure out how to succeed and create jobs. I think for those of you who have business backgrounds, that is a really important aspect of, I think, the experiences of many Asian Americans and what they bring to an elected office.
For our next question, I'll begin with Assemblyman Lowe. What inspires you to vote for a candidate when you're the voter?
Let's see here. I think what's important is when we take a look at candidates, as I mentioned, what do I look for in myself? And again, so I taught American government at a community college, and there's a sense of a delegate versus a trustee. Do you want Do you want to entrust in your elected representative that you know they will make the right decision, but you won't always agree with them? Or do you delegate to them such that they will vote according to what their district wants to vote? And so there's a difference of opinion in terms of delegate versus trustee, and at which times does that elected official act as a trustee or act as a delegate. And so what I think is important is, for me, that I know where a person stands in terms of the core values and their life experiences. And so when I see someone who is authentic, if I see someone who is at the farmer's market just as I am, or in the streets out with their communities, I think that level of authenticity is something that is tremendously valued, because to get outside of the normal average day, how do you get exposed to local elected officials and our state officials? You see what you see on TV, but that's behind the facade of a lot of the smoke and mirrors, so to speak. And so what I think is important, again, is which individual, in terms of making that assessment, can vote and encompass what they truly believe.
Assemblymember Chang, what inspires you to vote for a candidate?
So I would have to agree with Assemblymember Lowe, authenticity. But also, I want to also focus on a candidate's willingness to work hard. I think that's really important. And what I would like to encourage everyone out here to do, and not a lot of people do it, but I would encourage you all to do your own homework and research on candidates, because you shouldn't just hear like 3 bullet points. You should really do your homework on candidates, and that's what I do. And I would take the time to sit down and actually have conversations with them. I don't want to see any more, frankly, this is probably a wish of mine, I don't want to see any more candidates who are just in this for ego. I want to see that they're in it for the right reasons, that they really, truly want to make a difference. That is my wish, because we've all sacrificed so much to be here. And frankly, we work very, very hard. I don't really have a life outside of this work. But I love it because, I feel like we're really moving the ball forward. I just don't want to see any more people coming up here, for ego's sake, for just the title, just the name. And I think we're moving in the right direction. So I think that if I can leave one thing with you all is to just, do your own research. Don't just pay attention to what one campaign throws at the other, but just do your own research.
Assemblymember Chu, how do you decide how you're going to vote when you're the voter?
So all of us who are elected officials, along with the Apapa board, we've all probably spent a lot of time analyzing candidates. And in addition to what Evan and Ling Ling were just mentioning, your record in the community, your experience, your ability to connect with voters and to be genuine, these are all important things. I think I would add 2 more things to that. First of all, asking the question of why someone wants to run for office. And it's not just about what's the fire in your belly, but what motivates you to do the hard work that we're talking about. Because we all know elected officials who we just don't know why they're in office. We're not sure why they vote the way they do. We don't know what they're passionate about or who they are fighting for. So I think that's important. And then another thing that I look for often, actually always, is a real sense of integrity, a real sense of ethics. Because our community, we have been burned by some elected officials who had the trust of the community, who ultimately did not live up to that trust. In fact, every ethnic community in the state of California in recent years has seen too many examples of corruption, too many examples of a lack of ethics. And I think it's something we need to really grapple with as a community to make sure that our leaders are ones that have really the highest standards of virtue, because to be given that trust is an awesome responsibility, and we have to make sure that we hold ourselves to that. But let me close just by saying, I do hope out of this conversation, we haven't scared those of you in this room off who are thinking about running for office.
We'll talk about that next.
We are all looking for that next generation of leaders. At some point, we're all going to be turned out of office, and we need to see the next generation of leaders really moving our cities, our counties, and our state forward.
Same question to you, Assemblymember Mathis. What inspires you to vote for a candidate?
All of the above. You know, my colleagues here pretty much nailed it. I mean, you've got to look at the ethics, and for me, really, I look at how much somebody's willing to work for it. And we see a lot of people, and we're starting to see a lot of really crowded races now where there's, you know, instead of 2 or 3 candidates, there's 7, there's 8, there's 12. Who's willing to actually go out and do the work? Who really cares enough to spend their time? You know, for us, we're state assembly members. We spend 9 months out of the year in Sacramento. You know, Monday through Thursday into Friday. That's a lot of time. It's a lot of time away from home. It's how supportive is their spouse? How supportive is their family? Who do they have backing them? Who are they working with? Who are they working for? You know, we see, you know, David said it. There's some people that are in office where you just sit there and you go, what is this person doing here? And then you see other people that are out there that are working constantly to get things done. And we need those people. So those of you who are out there who are thinking about it, who are contemplating it, think about how much you're willing to work for it and how bad you want it. It's kind of that, when you train for something and you're at the end and you're really, really tired, do you give it your all, or do you give up because you got a side ache at the end of the race? You know, which candidate's going to do that? You know, everybody's always asking, you know, with all the presidential candidates, you know, which presidential candidate do you like? And I think about it, and it's, well, who do we want in this spot? Who's going to do what we trust them to do? You know, Evan nailed it with, you know, are they going to be the valued base, I know I can trust this guy? Or are they going to vote their district? Are they going to sit down and talk to everybody and all the stakeholders? You know, one of the things I pride myself on is working in a bipartisan manner and getting everybody's input together. And I like to see other people that do that. And that's one of the things I look for personally is who's the guy that's going to sit down and have the conversation, even if they know they're not going to agree with the person, who's willing to sit down and have those hard conversations and talk it out and come up with sound policy.
That answer segues perfectly into our final question of the panel. And that is, what would you say to the younger generations who might be in our audience who are thinking about running for office? And I'll begin with you, Assemblywoman Shea.
Well, I do have a particular message for the younger women out there, is to encourage them to run. Just do it. I was fortunate enough to be approached by even middle school aged girls when I was mayor of Diamond Bar asking me for internships because they'll say, we didn't know someone like you could be in this office. And particularly, I don't want to get all partisan, but because I'm Republican, I would go and speak to colleges and universities on panels about, you know, political engagement. And I'd ask the class, when you look at me, do you think I'm Republican or Democrat? And 97% would think that I'm Democrat. And, you know, it opens up the conversations, right? And people will ask me also, again, how do you overcome your name? You know, you look young. How were you able to win elections? And it just boils down to hard work, you know, and doing your homework. I stress that and time again is doing your homework. But don't be afraid of risk. I think the rewards definitely outweigh the risks. It's like what Evan said. You know, to be able to have such an impact on the state of California and in your communities, I mean, that is worth sacrificing for.
Assemblyman Chu, your advice to young people who might be thinking about running for elected office?
So my first advice, if you are young at the beginning of your career and you're thinking about doing the kind of jobs that we're in, get involved. Start volunteering. Get on to a nonprofit board. get involved in a campaign, approach those of us who are elected officials, because we have all mentored young folks who want to move forward. And to build on Ling Ling's point, we can use so much more API leadership in our state. And the opportunities we have to expand our leadership when it comes to the diversity of Asian American leadership, the gender of Asian American leadership, as well as really the generational leadership that we can see reflected in this room is so important. I will also say we do have a special opportunity, I think, in 2016 at the state level. And for those of you who may be in the middle of your careers thinking about moving things forward, we have an opportunity in the state legislature in the next year to elect the highest number of Asian Americans that we have ever had if we are smart. And the reason 2016 is so important is with new top 2 rules as well as the new 12-year terms, next year is really the last year for about 8 to 10 years where we will be able to elect a new generation of leaders to our state legislature. And not to get partisan for a moment, let me just state a fact. We have a record number of APIs in the state legislature. There are 12 of us. 3 happen to be Republican. 9 happen to be Democrats. But putting that aside, what's important for all of us who are here is that we work together to move our community forward. And in parts of the state that are more conservative, seeing great Asian Republican candidates succeed is important. In parts of the state that are more liberal, seeing great Asian Democrats succeed is important. That is how we thrive. And the opportunity that we have to work in a bipartisan nature, this is how we lead and this is how we succeed. And so I just want to thank Apapa for really convening this, bringing us together in this bipartisan way, and I look forward to electing some of you here in this room in the coming years. Thank you.
Assemblyman Mathis, your advice to potential future candidates?
Don't be scared. There was a point in my race where I was terrified, where nobody would return a phone call. But if you live in the Central Valley in July, everybody leaves because it's over 110. So keep calling people. Get out there and do it. I mean, our generation and the future generation, you know, we always talk about, like, what's the next update on my iPhone? What's the next this? Well, be the next. Get out there and do it. If you have one person that tells you no and another person that tells you no, well, go talk to somebody else. Because you can do it. The ability that you have is there. The only thing, some of the best advice, life advice I've ever gotten is that the only person that's stopping you is yourself. And that decision is yours. Whether you're going to do your homework, whether you're going to show up on time for your test, everything you do in life is your choice. You make that decision and make that choice, and don't be afraid to do it. And other people will gravitate to you and will be inspired by you getting out and doing it. Every one of you has the opportunity to do that and to run for office if you make that choice.
And Assemblyman Lowe has the final word on the panel. Your advice for future candidates?
Particularly for young candidates, imagine this, that the California American dream is it still attainable? I live in an area of San Jose in which one needs to earn $170,000 to afford a single-family home in my community. And I, as the former mayor of Campbell, and I, as a state legislator, I cannot even afford a single-family home in the community that I help govern. So when we talk about the opportunities of the American and Californian dream, how do we ensure that we are all participating and engaged in the process to allow for the opportunity for everyone? And so think about it for our current generations, but then your grandchildren and your future. And that's what's so important to sort of think about. How do we ensure that, what do we care about? What do we want to see for each other and for our society? And to be engaged in this process, a perfect way to get engaged is to say, well, if I served in public safety, could I run for the state assembly like Assemblymember Jim Cooper? Or if I'm a physician, could I run for the state senate like Richard Pan? and or to get involved in a political campaign, like I see potentially a future governor for the state of California, like volunteering for John Chung's campaign for governor. There are many ways to be involved, and lastly, let me just say that how do we expand the opportunity here for all generations, and it's not just us who have taken the time to be here on a weekend, but continue to move it forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much for these exceptional words of advice and wisdom. May I have one final hand for our panel, please, on breaking new barriers? Thank you so much to Assembly members David Chu, Devin Mathis, Evan Lowe, and Ling Ling Chang. Thank you. Our program will continue in just a bit.
Yo, blaze up the walk, light it up to the beat. Come on. Give it to me. Give it to me. Gorgeous with attitude and never latitude. Miss hot booty, come on, baby, do your duty. What?
जिस्मों का है ये जलवा, किस्मों का है ये जलवा, शोहरत भी दे ये जलवा, मकसद भी दे ये जलवा.
Tell him like it is. I can't hear.
दिलकश लगे ये जलवा, मैं कश लगे ये जलवा, नशा ही नशा ये जलवा, मजा ही मजा, नशा ही नशा. it up. She got the styling in her. Not even smiling in her. She got the styling in her.
Come along, feel the rhythm is in the air. Shake it alone, yeah. Keep swinging in style. Move by my side as the music is soaring. Go on shouting and roaring. Dancing around.
Let me see your hands up. That's right.
Oh yeah, sing is king, this is the thing. Do you know what I mean? Follow me, listen to me for a second, check it. Sing is the king, check the record. Sing is king, this is the thing. Do you know what I mean?
Aloha e hiko hine
pono ke ia. He li po ai pai ke one hinu la, vela I kala ke ia he, mai mana o he pono ke ia. Ho ko e kalinu ko, ke kauhi luna o na mokula, o ia mokula la e ho, o ni anai o ia nei. Ho ko e kalinu ko, ke kauhi luna o na mokula, o ia mokula la e ho, o ni anai o ia nei. Aina, haina, mai kapuana, kalihi poa me kalimu kohu, hoa pili oe me ka pahe, anoni me kalipalu. Haina, mai kapuana, kalihi poa me kalimu kohu, hoa pili oe me ka pahe, anoni me kalipalu.
Good afternoon. I am so pleased to join all of you. I want to begin by again thanking CC and his incredible vision to continue to gather us all together so that we can enhance the participation of not only Asian Pacific Islander Americans in the governmental, public policy, and private sector communities, but to involve all communities, because if we want California to prosper, we need to make sure that not only do we increase Asian Pacific American Islander participation, but we lift the prospects and hopes and opportunities for all Californians and eventually all Americans. I was asked to share with you for 5 minutes what's happening with California's finances. As the state treasurer, I am your banker. So I take on Wall Street, I take on others on behalf of the 38.8 million Californians. So let me share a little bit about the prospects of what has taken place in 2015. So as we remember, just a few years ago, in 2008, 2009, our great state was in deep financial trouble. Over a period of time, we had built up over a $30 billion cash deficit. We owed tens of billions of dollars in budgetary deficits. We had to take 3 important measures. And those 3 important measures by you and your fellow Californians have put California back on the right fiscal track. Now, let me go over those measures. Yes, this is why your participation is very important. If you remember, we used to have projected budgets. Budgets routinely were not signed on time here in California. The political differences that we witnessed today in Washington, D.C., unfortunately still occurred here in California. And so a few years ago, we had a budget that was 85 days late. That was in 2008. A couple of years later, we had a budget that was 100 days late. It impacted California's credit ratings. Education communities were being impacted. Healthcare providers weren't being paid timely or in full amounts. And so devastation was occurring in our communities in the period of time that we were having great economic difficulty. So the first measure that you took, you passed Proposition 25. And by passing Proposition 25, it reduced the voter threshold from a 2/3 majority to 50% plus 1 to pass a budget. Since the passage of that measure, we have had 5 on-time budgets in the state of California. The second measure you passed was Proposition 30. It was a tax increase both for income taxes and sales tax. Now, let's think back to why we did that. Governor Brown gave the voters of California a choice. You can either pass Proposition 30, or if we did not pass Proposition 30, we were going to have to reduce school funding. Why? When you think about what we spend your general fund tax dollars on. What are the general fund tax dollars? Those are the personal income taxes you pay, they're the sales taxes that you pay, and it's the corporate taxes that are paid. Revenues were weak. In California, 1.34 million Californians lost their jobs, obviously bringing in less revenues. But kids still have to go to school. Seniors and the disabled and special needs still need health care services, and we care about public safety, so we had to maintain public safety services. So the governor said, either we cut the school year, well, we're going to cut the school budget, which would have been a reduction for many school districts by about 15 days. And the voters of California well understood that California kids, relative to kids in other countries, go to school for less days. If we want our kids to get a world-class education, they obviously need a high-quality education, and they need to be in school. So the voters of California made a very difficult decision to pass those tax increases. This is what has happened. At that time in 2012, before the vote, 188 school districts were in negative or qualified certification, meaning negative certification, cash flow problems in the next 12 months. Qualified certification, cash flow problems in the next 3 years. Since the passage of Proposition 30, the number of school districts in trouble in the state of California has dropped from 188, educating 3 million of California's K through 3 million of California's 6.25 million K through 12 students. It's dropped to below 40 school districts in financial trouble. So you have stabilized the education finances temporarily for the state of California. And then the third measure that you passed was Proposition 2 in last November's election. It provided, and we all need to do this, a rainy day fund. We all know that you have to save money for bad times. Because for those of us who took economics and finance, we just have to go back to our basic lessons. There are business cycles. There are times when businesses are doing well, and there are times when businesses are not performing well. There are monetary cycles. There are commodity cycles. And when you get a down cycle, you have problems like we witnessed in 2008, 9, 10, when we actually have 12.5% unemployment rate in the state of California. It's down to just slightly above 6%. So that's the progress that we're making. Now, in the Treasurer's office, I work on the economics and the finances of this state, as in my prior position, but I work on external finances. So I ask all of you to think about how you can improve the financial condition of your life. So little things such as, it's time for all of us who have a loved one who's young and you want to have a better future, start to save money for their college education. I'll give you a simple example. My parents immigrated to this country from Taiwan. And when they came to this country in the early 1950s, and I was born in '62, the oldest child, as they wanted me and my brothers and my sister to get an education. So they used to take us to the bank nearly weekly, and they deposit $1 a week. And then as my dad made more money, my mom took care of us full time, they deposit $2 a week. Then they deposit $3 a week. Now, if I was born 17 years ago in the state of California, and my parents had that same habit, $4 a week, today, and I was entering college today, they would have paid for the entire fees for a community college education in the state of California. Imagine that. Give up one Frappuccino a week and get your child a community college degree in the state of California, right? That's the powerful difference that a small habit can make. So if you're interested, we run the scholarship program out of the Treasurer's office. Secondly, I am working on housing. For the first time in California history, the ratings agencies have stated that they're concerned about the lack of access to affordable housing. A few rich people have moved out of this state because of taxes, but more people are moving out of the state of California because we don't have accessible, affordable housing. It's an economic danger for the young people in the state of California. And so I'm working on rewriting the rules and regulations and trying to create partnerships amongst the community, coming up with better ideas so that we can create affordable housing for the homeless, for special needs, for seniors, and for young people. I also house a lot of economic development authorities. So whether you are opening a taco truck or you're opening the next Tesla, we have a whole bunch of grant, loan, and credit support programs in the Treasurer's office. One of the things we have to figure out in California and America, and it's a discussion that happens all across the globe, is what is the next major industry that replaces the loss of jobs in manufacturing? That's the middle class of California and America. So we want to help finance your ideas so that we can create economic prosperity all across the board in California. And then last, I work on your retirement. Nearly half the baby boom generation in this country does not have adequate savings for their retirement. We want people that actually aspire and have their golden years. So I'm working on Kevin De Leon's legislation to make sure that we come up with alternative plans to create for the 7.5 million Californians who do not have an employer-based retiree plan so that we can put that in place. So in the Treasurer's office, I hope those of you who are inspired to create better ideas, better communities, better friendships for a more prosperous future will work with my office or any of the other great elected officials or appointed officials that you saw earlier today, because it only coming together are we going to make sure that we can create the state that really recognizes the promise and prosperity that is indeed the golden ideal of California. Thank you very much, Apapa. That's it.
Troubles come and my heart burdened be, then I am still and wait here in the silence until you come and sit a while with me.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our Perspectives on Accelerating Our Movement Forward panel, moderated by Ms. Sharon Ito.
Hello, everybody. How are you? Other than tripping on the stage just a few seconds ago, I'm doing fine. Thank you for coming to the Apapa Education Forum, and we have 4 gentlemen here that we have questions of, so we want to continue our discussion so that you know what the issues are. This panel specifically Perspectives on Accelerating Movement Forward for Apapa. So let's go ahead and start. We want to go ahead and do introductions and say hello. We have Treasurer here, John Chung. How are you? We have next to him former Assembly Member, now Senator Richard Pan. How are you? Next, we have Assembly Member Jim Cooper. Hello. And then Congressmember Ted Lieu. How are you? So I guess the way we're going to run this is you have microphones, right, on the sofa? So we're going to ask these questions, and then each gentleman will then have, we're looking at about a 1-minute response, okay? So our first question, what barriers have you personally faced in the political arena as a result of your ethnicity, and how you have overcome them? So let's go ahead and start with Treasurer Chung.
So when I became involved in public service in 1988 here in the state of California, I quickly realized that the Asian Pacific American Islander community was not active. They didn't have meaningful membership, and they certainly weren't leaders in many of the infrastructural organizations that were critical to moving the interests of this community and others along. So I just decided to volunteer, and ultimately others decided to volunteer, so that today we've created that infrastructure. What's very important is that we build that pipeline. Asian Americans in business leadership, Asian Americans in environmental community, Asians in labor, Asians in NGOs. By building those partnerships, by getting access to the resources, by getting the attention of others, we can develop meaningful policies.
Thank you, Treasurer. Senator.
So I would say we have both what we call internal and external. Internal, as a child of immigrants, my parents certainly didn't expect any of us to go into politics. In fact, discouraged it in the sense that they felt that anyone who looked and sounded like us would never be elected. So I think there's a part of if you're an immigrant or you're a child of immigrants that people may not necessarily be encouraged to consider running for public office. Certainly the idea of becoming president was not in the sight for me when I was growing up, because there was no way we'd ever succeed in something like politics, where we would be judged by our appearance and where we came from. At the same time, when I say externally, when I first ran for office, actually, decided to actually take the leap, there were people who said that an Asian couldn't win in that district when I ran. And actually, interesting enough, the person who proved that wrong is the man sitting next to me right here, our state treasurer at the time when he ran for state controller. He had actually won the district in his statewide race, and we were able to use that to prove to people that, yes, someone, an API, can win in this district. But yet, there were people who said that they couldn't win, and therefore said people should not, I should not be nominated. And so, thankfully, we have people leading the way, like our state treasurer and others here as well. But we have both those internal and external, so I would certainly encourage people who are interested in public office, please do so. Please do so. We need more candidates, and also that we also need to send a stronger message to people. And I think we've demonstrated in many different races that Asian Pacific Islanders can win races, especially since our community isn't a majority in many districts. So many people go, well, it's not an Asian seat, as they say. But we've demonstrated we can win those districts as well by working hard and talking about our stories.
Thank you, Senator. Assemblyman Cooper, what barriers have you faced?
It started about 30 years ago in 1984 when I joined the Sheriff's Department. There were less than 12 African Americans in the department, even less API members, and rose through the ranks to become a rank of captain, and then was the first African American mayor in the Sacramento region for the city of Elk Grove. And back then, Elk Grove was not very diverse, and I spent 15 years in the council and won the assembly seat last year. So it's always been tough, especially coming from law enforcement, and not a lot of minorities in law enforcement. I look at API in the Sheriff's Department, and just 2 have attained the rank of captain or higher. So there's still issues looming in law enforcement for folks like that. But definitely, I think it was a plus, and sometimes it was minuses, but overall, we need more diversity in our law enforcement ranks and political ranks around Sacramento. Look around the region and think about who your leaders are on a local level. Not a lot of diversity.
Congressman.
Thank you. Let me first thank CC and the Board of Apapa for putting on this tremendous event today. We have an amazing country, but our country has had blind spots, and one of them is in terms of race and ethnicity. We had the whole yellow peril earlier in our country's history, followed by the alien land laws and the Chinese Exclusion Act. Our country then interned over 100,000 Americans simply because they were of Japanese descent. That was followed by the Winho Lee cases, and more recently now, cases against Asian Americans who were indicted for spying, only have those charges dropped. And so there is sort of a perception among some people, among some folks in America, among some folks in our government, that people who look like you and me are somehow not Americans or second-class citizens. And so we're fighting back against that, and that's one of the issues that I've worked on. I know it's one of the issues that Apapa has worked on, and I look forward to working with all of you to challenge those stereotypes.
Our next question, thank you. For ethnic communities to move forward, they must know and understand how national and world issues affect them locally. What efforts are you making or have you made to bring your constituents on board regarding key national and world issues like economy, jobs, education, environment, etc.? Let's go ahead and start with the Senator Pam.
Well, I think that in terms of trying to educate people about what's going around the world, that is something that certainly we try to do working with various organizations. That's why organizations like Apapa are so very important, because this organization helps have forums like this one where we can talk about these particular issues. But in addition, what's also important is not just being aware or knowing about the issues, but actually being able to organize our community to actually make a difference in these issues, to shape the events and not simply learn about them. And that's why, again, this organization and many others are so important, because what we need to do is think about, we need to know what's going on around the world, how it's impacting us, but then also how do we change that, and how do we get more people from our community, and how do we create more diverse leaderships in government, in business, in nonprofits, and many other places, and how can we as a community come together to try to move, to actually set the agenda and move that agenda forward. So certainly it's very important to talk about issues, and organizations can help spread those things, but it's even equally important then to take the next step is to have people step forward to figure out how do we then bring our perspective and be sure that we actually shape the events, not merely just learn about them.
Assemblyman Cooper.
It's an education process to educate those folks because there's so many benefits out there, and we aren't doing enough for communities of color. Most recently, the legislature passed legislation to make health care for all, whether you're an immigrant or not. And that was an important piece of legislation that came out of the Senate. And just things like that to inform people and bring up leaders. There are so many young leaders out there that can do a great job at mentoring. What are our next group of leaders to come up? It's funny because we weren't elected from largely immigrant districts or Asian districts. So it's that mass voter appeal, getting out there and choosing those right candidates. And I tell my staffers, it's okay to be ambitious, to want to succeed and climb up and do something about it, and really reaching those voters and telling them what services are available. Doesn't matter your income. There are lots of programs for college, for a variety of programs that our kids can get engaged in, and it's so important to reach out there, especially with communities of color, black and brown and Asian and API. We've got to change that and educate them as much as we can. We're doing a good job. We can do a better job, though.
Both Congress and the California State Legislature are in 2-year legislative cycles. And when I was in the California State Senate, every 2 years I would vote about 5,000 times. And on those 5,000 plus bills, 80-some%, I did not get a single phone call, a single email, a single fax, or a single meeting. So when you go and meet with your legislators, whether it's in Washington, D.C. or Sacramento, or when you call in or you send an email or you send a fax, it does have an effect on us. It has an effect on my staff. It has an effect on me. We're wondering why are all these people now writing in about this particular issue. It makes us focus on it. So that's one way you can affect change. Another way is if you see an issue that really offends you, write a letter to the editor, and you'll be surprised. After a while, if you keep on doing that, you're going to get published, and you can affect change that way. There are lots of ways to get involved. You can join campaigns. You can intern in different places. And afterwards, come up to me. If you're interested in a political or judicial appointment or at the state or federal level, let me or any of the API caucus members know, or your assembly member, and they will help you.
I actually like to follow up on Ted's earlier comment. I want to give a lot of kudos to Ted for publicly speaking out about a lot of the investigations that aren't fully baked, not well-based in regards to investigations against Chinese American scientists. Ted's been a national leader in speaking out for that. So Ted, thank you in that particular regard. What I like about the, yes. What I enjoy about serving on this panel with my colleagues here is that all of them are incredibly active in their community. They're accessible, they're intelligent, they want to engage in increasing democratic participation in the institutions in California. And so they're accessible to making sure that the values, that the observations and the best thoughts of their local residents are brought to bear. And so when I served on the Board of Equalization, which was my first public office, I used to attend more than 900 public events because I wanted to make sure that I was working on the issues, that I was accessible, that we can make particular change. Now, the districts we all represent are incredibly large. So one of the things that we use is that we also use technology. So some of you know that I posted government employees' websites because not everybody can check against the excesses that happen in the city of Bell. I started posting the finances of local government because you have a lot of really terrific communities, more importantly, the people in those communities. But it just can't be the state officials who are checking if a city like Vallejo runs into financial difficulty or Mammoth Lakes. It's local leadership. So what we try to do is do our work, but empower through access to the information and knowledge that we have so that you can help govern your local communities, build the partnerships that change our future.
Thank you. Our next question regards business and the economy. Small business owners are still the backbone to our economy, and many ethnic minorities are small business owners. What efforts or plans have you designed or implemented to support small businesses and to give them access to more capital?
Small business truly is the backbone of most business in California. It's not big corporations. And it's so important as legislators that we pass laws that make it easier to do business here in California and don't burden those businesses. And a lot of them are minority owned. And it's so important. In my district, we had a Google workshop and a Facebook workshop on how to grow your business. It's so important. Go business on small business loans and one on Yahoo. And it's critical that we do as much as we can. And being a moderate Democrat, I'm a business Democrat. How can we grow business? If business is growing and flourishing, folks will spend money, they will hire and create jobs. And it's so important to walk that fine line and balance that to make sure we help business as much as we can. And I see the pendulum swinging in California, where it's becoming more business friendly, because for a long time, it wasn't business friendly. It was tax, tax, tax. And as business owners, you know, that's not a good formula.
I grew up in a small business. My parents immigrated to the U.S. to seek the American dream, and when they came here, they were poor and they didn't speak English well, and we grew up. Basically, they went to flea markets and sold gifts and jewelry, but over many years, they were able to expand to 6 gift stores in shopping malls, and it was always very clear to me that having a small business is very difficult, and government, at the very least, if we can't help, we should first do no harm. But there are things that government can do to help. One way is to make sure that we increase and solidify the small business loans that are offered by the SBA. We also, right now in Congress, are trying to reauthorize the Export-Import Bank. Even though big businesses benefit from that, the overwhelming majority of beneficiaries of the Export-Import Bank are small businesses. Just last week, we were able to get a bill through what's called a discharge position onto their floor that will be voted on later this month, and hopefully we can get that reauthorized.
In addition to the programs that I mentioned when I was giving my remarks, when I was at the Board of Equalization, it continues today, I started free tutorials for small businesses because I didn't want you to become overwhelmed by the complexity of the tax code. Between the federal and state tax code, there are 10 million words, and it's really easy to make a mistake. And those mistakes can be devastating in regards to just the existence of those businesses. So if you are starting a business that has some implications with the Board of Equalization, contact your representative, and they do them in different languages. So I wanted to make sure that we were accessible, especially to immigrant communities. So when I was the Board of Equalization members, we did it in Korean, we did it in Thai, we did it in Cantonese, we did it for our Armenian community, and so you can get those safe harbor protections. Secondly, next year, or targeted for next year, what I'm trying to do with the 14 economic development agencies that I chair as the state treasurer, I'm trying to create an Amazon website, because you coming to me and trying to understand all the financing rules is far too complicated. I want this to be a model for all of government at some point. So you come and tell me that you are opening a restaurant, like C.C. Yin when he first came to this country. He has Board of Equalization, he has Secretary of State, he has Franchise Tax Board, he has local government, he has all these requirements. If you come to my website next year in the winter, what we want to do is you tell us what type of business you're starting, we'll say, do you do this, right? And we will, if you say yes, we will say, we have this credit support program, we have this loan program, we have these other types of programs to assist you. Because we want to make it, in the Treasurer's office, a one-stop stop. Ultimately, I'd love to see it for government to have a one-stop stop to say, if you're going to do this, these are all the programs and requirements you have to do business in the state of California.
So, my family, we're small business owners. My wife is a dentist. We have started the dental practice from scratch. I know that, in fact, many people in our community, many immigrants start their own businesses, sometimes because it's hard to advance in another business, right? Sometimes people face discrimination and they're not able to advance, and people don't think of them as being so-called management or CEO material, so they said, I'm going to strike out on my own, start my own business. And we need to help work with people who are starting their own business to help them succeed and grow. And so certainly as a small business owner, I know that we have to borrow the money, that the owner's the last one to get paid, and sometimes if the books are negative, you don't get paid at all. You worked all month, your staff, you meet payroll first, you get what's left. At the same time, when you deal with government, you try to do the right thing. And I think it's very important we try to simplify the complexity, and I appreciate what my colleagues here are trying to do to help small business owners. Because as I said, my wife's a dentist. She said, I want to focus on providing the best dental care I can, but I'm also the HR person, I'm also the environmental person and everything else. And sometimes it's hard to keep track of all the rules, right? I mean, my specialty, my training is in dentistry. And so we need to help small businesses be able to who want to do the right thing. The ones who actually are acting in good faith, trying to do the right thing, to be sure that they're able to do that they're not going to get harassed if they make a small mistake, that they're unknowingly, that they have the opportunity to try to address those things. At the same time, I also mentioned that as a small business owner, I also know that you need customers. And that's why I think it's so important that I know all of us here have been working to grow the middle class, because we need to grow the middle class so there's more customers for small businesses so you can actually sell more. And that's also very important too. And that's one of the things that I'm also fighting for to be sure we grow the middle class so there are more customers, people who can buy the goods and services not only my wife but every other small business owner wants to sell. And that's also part of how we make our economy grow. We need to help small businesses, and we also need to grow the middle class. And through that, that's how we make our economy succeed.
Can I ask the audience if you could raise your hand and perhaps the gentleman can see, how many of you are immigrants or your parents or grandparents were immigrants? A lot of hands going up. So this question, immigration policy is an area that greatly affects immigrant communities, such as those in this room. How would you fix our current immigration system? And we'll start with the congressman.
Thank you. I support comprehensive immigration reform. The bill that passed the U.S. Senate last term had three components. One, it was going to strengthen our borders, which I support. It was also going to increase the number of applicants slots available for folks who come in through H-1B visas and other kinds of visas. And it was going to provide a pathway to citizenship for the people who are already here, who are undocumented. If a version of that bill were to be put on the floor of the United States House of Representatives, it would pass with bipartisan support. Unfortunately, you have this Tea Party caucus within the Republican caucus that's very extreme, and they've been holding that bill up. And as a result, we haven't been able to move forward. My hope is that after 2016 presidential elections, that bill will appear on the House floor, and when it does, we will have comprehensive immigration reform.
So I concur with Ted at the federal level as to requiring comprehensive immigration reform, looking at work patterns, looking at family patterns. Historically, you used to see massive debates about country preferences. That's part of the reason that you used to have discrimination against certain immigrants from various countries. At a local or state level, I think in California, we need to look at what's taking place in places such as Nashville, Tennessee, how when you have immigrants come into this country, come into your particular jurisdiction, state to local levels, what types of programs, how do you integrate them into society, especially in regards to business efforts. At the federal level, there's a small business administration effort trying to tie immigrants as to better understanding as to what are the economic patterns so that in the event that they want to create businesses, the programs at the SBA are available. So we have a whole host of programs available in the state, making sure that we can integrate them into society as quickly as possible so that they can have a productive professional and personal life in whatever community they reside in.
Well, I certainly agree with our good congressman, and glad. Thank you so very much for your leadership, Congressman Liu, on immigration reform. And we need comprehensive immigration reform, and we certainly at the state, in the absence of federal effort, because unfortunately there is a minority that's blocking action at the federal level. We've done what we can here in California to make California more welcoming to immigrants, because we recognize here in California that immigrants are an asset, and immigrants help actually stimulate our economy, stimulate our state, makes our state a better place. When we think about all the businesses that have been opened by immigrants and what that's been able to do for our state. And so certainly we've worked hard here in California to pass laws to be more welcoming to immigrants and recognizing the contributions they make. Frankly, I have to say that I'm very disturbed by the rhetoric that's been happening this presidential election, particularly, unfortunately, on the opposite party side. with proclamations that we're just going to deport everybody. And actually, unfortunately, establishment candidate by name of Bush said that anchor babies were Asians. He wasn't talking. I mean, that's very disturbing. That kind of rhetoric is going on. I call on whether Democrat or Republican. I think it's important that we stand up together and say that immigrants contribute to the economy, and we're not going to put up with that kind of rhetoric. That's not going to be acceptable here in the United States of America.
I don't envy Ted being in Congress. It's good to be a Democrat here and to be in the majority party in California. It's a great thing. I also think, as far as immigration goes, we've done a lot here in our legislature. Health care. Your immigrant status doesn't matter. You will get health care, especially children here in California. Driver's licenses. You can get a driver's license here in California. So in some regards, California actually leads the nation on immigrant issues, and we're doing more. And it's really so important, as Dr. Pan said, those folks do pay taxes. They are productive citizens. They contribute a lot to California and our nation. And hopefully we can get beyond this and have a meaningful dialogue on this issue, because it's time and folks keep dragging it out and don't really address the real issue.
We have our next question, gentlemen. What do you feel is our state and nation's greatest challenge? And we'll start with the treasurer.
I think it's creating world-class education for every child. I think once a child has an education, they can be resilient to all the challenges. We have huge economic challenges. We have huge healthcare challenges. We have financial challenges. But if you give a child a world-class education, hopefully it blossoms, it flowers into greater opportunities. Now, that being said, it's really important that we create the relationships. The relationships in your life, whether it's economic studies, whether it's human management, whether it's sociology, they impact your financial and emotional happiness. So keep up the work that you're doing here in Apapa, right? Because that's how you address the challenges for the 21st century.
Senator?
Well, I have to agree with our good state treasurer that certainly education and opportunity for education is going to be fundamental to try and address, I'd say, the disparities we have in our society. So as we look at our community and our society, we can see that, unfortunately, whether it's based on your zip code or your race or ethnicity, you can have very different outcomes in terms of your health, your education, your opportunities for life. And we need to try to work together to reduce those disparities. I think it's very important that we as the API community work closely with our good friends and colleagues in the Latino and African American and Native American communities as well, and also, of course, with the mainstream as well. That, in fact, sometimes people have looked at our community as being, quote, the model minority, and I think many of us understand the model minority myth. And in fact, when you look at what the API community has to face, first of all, we're not monolithic, but even when people say, oh, look, Asians do so well, same time, we notice that very few API are in senior management or CEO positions, no matter what field. I'll tell you, in my own field of medicine, you look at medical school admissions, people go, oh, look, there's a bunch of Asians in medical school. And admittedly, I think we're short on some Asians, we're short on some of the particular Pacific Islanders, and then when you look at physicians and medical school faculty, say, oh, look at all of them. There's actually more than the percentage in the population. If you look at department chairs and medical school faculty, falls right off. And you know, there's over 140 medical schools in the United States. You know, you realize there's not a single API medical school dean in the United States of America. What is going on? What is going on here? And I think, I think what that speaks to is that sometimes people say, well, the API community doesn't have the same challenges some of the other minority groups do. But actually we do. We may have it at different places, but we do have those challenges, and we all need to work together together to try to address these disparities. So that's just one example, but I think that is something that I think that a challenge that our community should take up and again, work together to figure out how do we be sure that everyone has the same opportunity to succeed, no matter what race or ethnicity, no matter which part of the geography they come from, and that we're going to work together to address those things.
The economy is the big issue. the gap between haves and have-nots has grown exponentially over the years. And that's really a big issue. In my district, you look at schools, Title I schools, a lot of kids of color, API, African American, Latino, are on reduced or free breakfast, lunch, and dinner even in schools. Folks are having a hard time putting food on the table and getting by. We're squeezing out the middle class and the lower income folks. It is tough getting by, and that's the hard part. Communities of color, we've got to do more with that and bring jobs and education. And that's the toughest part. You look at these communities of color, what do they have? Underperforming schools, no banks, no supermarkets, no arts programs or sports programs for kids. We are failing our children. Those tools are available. Until you do a better job, and folks want to talk about everything else but those issues, and think about your worst community where you live at. Your worst community. It's been that way for 40, 50, 60 years. We can do CEQA exemptions and build stadiums and revitalize downtown, but what are we doing for our young kids? That's the challenge, absolutely nothing, and we've got to do a better job at that. Invest in that, and I'll tell you what, crime drops and a lot of your other issues will fall to the wayside. But until that investment happens, it's not going to change.
Thank you. I agree with the panelists that growing our economy for all Americans and increasing educational opportunities for all Americans is what we need to do to move America forward. But in the long term, I think there's only one issue that can kill us as a species if we don't do something about it, and that's climate change. We do know that we can measure the effects of climate change. We know that last year was the hottest year in recorded history, only to be outdone by the first 6 months of this year. We know that in the last century, our ocean levels have risen 6.7 inches, and now it's accelerating in the last decade. We know our snowpacks are melting. We know we have more extreme weather events than ever before. If we don't start doing way more things about climate change, your children, your grandchildren are going to live in a much worse environment, and some of them are going to die because of it. So I think that's the one issue that all of us as a society have to tackle.
Thank you. What do you think can be done to accelerate the movement forward of ethnic minorities into the political arena over the next few years? And we'll start with Senator Pan.
So I think sort of going back to where we started in this panel, it's really about organizing. It's organizations like Apapa. We need more organizations, people who, venues by which we can organize ourselves. I think as our treasurer says, John Chung said, my own experience, I'm sure their experiences. I mean, what happens is that when you're trying to run for the first time for leadership, or if you're trying to get promoted, if you don't have people who can help support you, some of us are going to have to be the first one. I mean, I'm the first API legislator to represent in the state legislature. I had other people ahead of me in Congress and other in my area to represent Sacramento. We need to build that infrastructure, and we need that support. And so I think that, again, Apapa plays an extremely important role. And Apapa not only has this forum and has the various chapters, but the internships, which then give opportunities for young people to learn more about what the pathway is. If I ever asked my parents, how do I get into politics, they'd probably look at me blankly and say, well, I have no idea. I don't think it's a good idea, right? So you need to have other people who can say, hey, look, I want to be just like Ted Lieu, and that's why I want to be in Congress. And someone says, there actually is a Ted Lieu in Congress, and there's actually a pathway. I may not know how to get there, but let's talk to Ted, or to John Chung, or to Jim Cooper. I think that's really important, and that we need to have organized ways of doing that as well, and have that infrastructure. And then for the people who actually do it, we need to have the support to make that happen. Because that's what people turn around, they go, okay, well, what support are you going to get from the API community, your API? And if there isn't that infrastructure there, it can be done, but it's much, much harder. And so that's why I'm so appreciative of what CC Yin has done, and the leaders of Apapa in this organization, and also many other API who have stepped up and said it's time to organize, and so we can try to both motivate and then help support people who are interested, who are going to step up and take that challenging step to be a leader in the community.
CC Yin had the vision and created Apapa. And because Apapa was created here in Sacramento, or California's ground zero, so I've had the chance to see it firsthand. And there's nothing like it in the African American community or the Hispanic community. And it works. It's mentoring, finding our best and brightest future leaders, and it's so important. I left City Council last year, and a young man, Darren Soon, who was Chinese, had been talking for 5 years with me about running for my seat and taking my seat. And he took over for me last year on the City Council seat. And recently, Apapa had a forum at the Capitol for potential candidates for state office. So Darren got to come and mentor me, or not mentor me, but job shadow me for a day and see my job as an assemblyman. And that's really what helps, finding those good leaders out there. And there are good young leaders all over the place, but a forum to engage them and bring them inside and teach them the what, whys, and wheres. And organizations like Apapa, I mean, CC's done a great job with that. And we need more leaders like that in the minority community to make a difference. And it's so critical right now. Look at our numbers. And we have to have representation up there, folks that look like us and talk like us to make a difference and really address our issues. Otherwise, it doesn't get done. So CC, my hat off to you.
Let me commend Assemblymember Cooper and Senator Pan for helping to pass California's law that's going to automatically register people to vote at DMVs. That's a tremendous move forward. So getting more people registered to vote and then having people vote is a huge game changer. If you can have more ethnic minorities vote and vote at high propensities, that will start affecting policy changes. And if you look at what Martin Luther King fought for, a lot of it was for the ballot box, to make changes at the ballot box, get people to vote. And if any of you can help do that, it'll make a big difference. And all of us on this panel know that when people campaign, not only do you ignore people who are not registered to vote, right, in terms of your mailers, in terms of targeting, you only end up focusing on people who actually are high propensity voters. So as a result, these folks end up having a disproportionate influence on government. So if we can get more people all across our communities registered to vote and then voting at high levels, that would have a profound effect. And for those of you who are interested in government, think about volunteering on a campaign. Apapa does a great job with its internships. Think about helping out during your summers. So there are things you can learn about government that might interest you to continue to pursue a path in government.
I'm going to try to tie 4 concepts quickly into responding. So the first is social identity theory. People hang out and address and have a perspective of who they're comfortable with. Secondly, the winning breeds success. So people who watch winners oftentimes replicate it. Third is the combinatory theory of how, in linguistics, how people interact create the next generation of ideas. So what I love about here is here we have Sacramento, we have Jim and Richard, right? They work together, they're really cooperative, they understand. But in my comments I mentioned, I didn't just say Asian Pacific Islander theory, because what they are is, and they're represented here in Sacramento, and Jim, I'm especially appreciative you're here, is that they reach out to everybody, right? So it ought not just to be Asians inspired by Asians, right? When I grew up, I was inspired by Martin Luther King and Cesar Chavez, right? Because there wasn't an Asian on TV that I could identify with. And so what we all have the power to do, and here's the 4th concept, politics is the exercise of power. Every day I feel we're blessed because we get to wake up, we can be inspired, we can work on how we make our friends, our families, our communities' lives better, right? And that's what I want to share with all of us, right? So by exercising your power, and it doesn't have to just be political power, you turning around and recognizing somebody, sharing ideas, introducing them to somebody, working on the PTA, sharing faith in church, working on critical issues, will eventually change how we live and govern. So tie all those concepts, and that's how you build a more expansive opportunity for everybody.
And then as we wrap up this conversation, oh, did I miss someone? No. As we wrap up this conversation, I just wanted to ask, what will we see your name on, and as far as programs or legislation, so we can keep an eye on you? So about 30 seconds, okay, for each answer. What are you going to spearhead? Very general question as we wrap things up. Do you want to start, Jim?
That's a great question. It's funny. We introduced over 4,000 pieces of legislation, and the governor only signed 800. So something that benefits California, and my passion really is our children, because we've been letting our children down in communities. So future legislation on that, something that makes it better, a better world, a better California for our young people.
Thank you.
Thank you. The first bill I wrote and introduced in Congress was to replicate basically California's climate change laws nationwide. And my view of how we solve this problem is we have America do what California has done and the rest of the world do what California has done. And that's how we have a better life for our children and your children. And also, the other issue I'm working on is to get the Attorney General of the United States to start investigating these cases where you do have Asian Americans being falsely arrested and indicted for alleged espionage cases, only have all those charges dropped.
Two major things you're going to see unfold in the Treasurer's Office is as I did with the state's financial data, I am going to post the state's debt data. We know that we got into the last fiscal trouble because America took on too much debt, whether it's the financial sector, whether it was government, whether it was the private sector. So we're going to highlight the state's financial debt so that we can meaningfully tackle it. This is the real big issue for me. It's always been, that's why I run for financial offices. The inequality of opportunity in America, and especially as it relates to economics. So what's happening is that because we're losing manufacturing, the inconsistency of job hours, right, and the emergencies, whether it's healthcare emergencies or somebody's car breaks down, really puts people at the margins really in deep, deep trouble. So we're going to work on disclosing more of that data, but more importantly, coming up with different financial products and solutions so that we can get people through life without as much stress, being overwhelmed, which oftentimes create greater mental health incidences in the state of California.
Well, certainly as a physician, I ran for the state senate to keep people safe and healthy, and so I'm going to continue to work on that. Particularly, we're going to continue to work on getting people health care coverage. I'm proud that we've been able to expand, reduce the number of uninsured by over half in the state of California, expand coverage for immigrants here in the state. We also, in addition to coverage, we have to make our health care actually work for people. So just having a coverage card isn't enough, and I've certainly led the fight on issues, for example, on what's going on with the Denti-Cal program and Medi-Cal program, be sure that they work for people. But it's not just about the health care part if we're going to talk about health. It's also about how do we create healthier environments as well. How do we be sure the community is safer and healthier as well? So what are the things we can try to do to promote healthy lifestyles? How do we create the built environment to support that as well? So it's not just about the health care, but it's also about how do we create healthier environments as well. And that actually is part of the reason also I'm very actively supported the package of climate change bills that came through in the state of California, because I know that has actually a significant health impact as well as multiple other impacts. And then finally, I have to admit, as the senator representing Sacramento, the other major thing that I'm also focusing on is that the state government, we're the capital, very proud of that, but the state government is the largest employer, it's the largest landlord in our community, and any district in which someone's the largest employer and the largest landlord, we expect them to be a good citizen, to take a leadership role in the community they're in. And so I think the state of California needs to step up and take more of be a good citizen to the Sacramento region. And that certainly as a member, I guess, of the legislature or the board of directors of sorts of this state, we need to do more to be sure that our state government is actually doing right by the city in which the headquarters is residing. And so we're going to be working with various agencies in state government about how do we promote healthier workplaces, what's the state's role in economic development for our local area as well here in Sacramento, given its large footprint, and many other issues related to that as well. So those are my priorities. Thank you.
So once again, we want to thank the gentlemen here, our officials here, State Treasurer John Chung. Thank you. Senator Richard Pan, Assemblymember Jim Cooper, and Congressmember Ted Lieu.